So the TAM for real estate is massive. So often as an investor, when somebody comes to you and says, we have $1 trillion TAM, you kind of roll your eyes. You're like, your total addressable market is obviously not that. In the case of Opendoor, that's really true. And as you just mentioned, you folks are doing things in title and mortgage and the actual house buying and selling. How has the traditional real estate world reacted to that, consumers, agents, et cetera?
Yeah, it's been interesting the evolution of how the market's reacted, and one of the things that's I've been in the Valley for 10 years. Elad's been here since the beginning of time, but I think this notion of time to clone is interesting to track, and 10 years ago it was probably 4 to 5 years, and now it's kind of months because there's infrastructure and lots of funding. But the market itself, so consumers have reacted well. I think our conversion is very high. We convert one in two sellers who receive an offer. And I think the solution around kind of selling your home online, removing all of the hassle and uncertainty really does resonate. With agents, it's been more mixed. And so I think agents have been skeptical to start and are starting to use Opendoor in different ways, more around delivering certainty for their clients. But I think the reality with realtors today is that their role is really shifting from project management, especially in our ecosystem where we're automating a lot of the processes, to more of an advisor. And I think that makes agents uncomfortable, right? And so parts of their role are being automated away. And a good example is we launched this kind of buy now button in 2017 on the resale side. So we have houses, we buy directly from sellers, we own inventory, and we build an elegant experience to buy one of our homes. We tried this buy now button, which was like, how do we simplify the transaction? Right now in real estate, it's like a bunch of negotiations, a bunch back and forth. And the reality was there was a lot of realtors still in the system, and they kind of viewed their role as negotiations. And so even though we had this buy now button, people still wanted to negotiate the price. And so I think it's going to take a little bit of time for agents to realize that actually the automation will happen, and their role is really to be an advisor to the customer.
I guess real estate in general is both massive, but it's also very fragmented. And you're dealing with offline assets. So whenever you deal with atoms instead of bits, it's a much harder thing to do. How do you think about the role of real estate, technology in real estate in the coming few years? What should we expect, or what are the big changes that you think are going to be coming?
Yeah, I think it's one of the things that Opendoor is done well, which is manage this atoms and bits transition and merging technology with operations. I see a lot of new businesses in real estate trying to do that well for other categories. And I think that's really where there's going to be differentiation in a competitive mode, is if you can not just build software well, not just build algorithms well, but also use technology, people, and process to make operations really efficient at scale. I think that's where you build massive businesses in real estate, because obviously we're dealing with physical assets themselves. So I think any company can do technology and operations well together, will build a big moat.
What are some of the companies you think are worth keeping an eye on then in real estate technology?
I'm going to ask you the same question. So, I see, again, to this kind of notion that real estate is a physical asset and you have to operate it from property management to the selling of it, to showing of it. The ones that are kind of adjacent to us, I think Clutter is an interesting business because they're kind of taking logistics and operations and trying to build technology on top of that. And I see a lot of these kind of home maintenance companies starting, like Setter. And that's actually an interesting category to go into, which is how do you make kind of the servicing of your home one click? But what are the things that you like?
Yeah, I think there's a couple interesting things happening. I mean, to your point, Clutter, I think, is doing interesting things. There's a company called Mosaic, which is basically a vertically integrated builder. And so they've actually written a programming language called Dog, which allows them to be more efficient in sort of managing construction teams. And so that's a really interesting approach in terms of asking how can you drop the cost of construction and basically create a higher margin business off of something that's traditionally been very labor intensive. So I think that's interesting. And then I think there's just interesting innovation happening in different models of financing, mortgages, et cetera. So Divvy would be an example of that. Cul-de-sac seems to be doing interesting things. So it seems like there's a handful of companies, many actually started by Opendoor alumni. Which I think is often you can see the density of talent in a company is reflected by the eventual number of startups that are spawned. And there have been some really amazing things that have come out of Opendoor alumni at a time. So I think that's something that's worth noting as well in terms of what you guys have accomplished. Maybe we can shift a little bit more to sort of lessons from the role of the CEO. I mean, you've grown the company now from 400 to 1,200 people in a year, which is a really fast pace. Can you share some of the things that worked and didn't work when you were scaling that organization so quickly?
Yeah, lots of things don't work, and I actually think that's okay. And one of the things we try to do at Opendoor is to really pressure test systems. The only way to do that is to hire aggressively, to push customers through the system, and then you kind of see what breaks. So I think things breaking is okay insofar as you fix things very quickly. I think the things that I wish I could have focused on more is in the beginning of last year, we kind of knew we wanted to scale the staff pretty aggressively, and we had seen customer adoption really rapidly grow. I would have invested more heavily in kind of onboarding, and I think we made underinvestments in internal comms. So the way the company structure is, we have a big office in SF, which is kind of engineering, product, and design, and we have now an engineering hub in LA, but we also have 20 offices that have operators in them, and so the internal comms piece becomes critical as you're onboarding so much, so many people into the system, and they haven't been there since the beginning, so they don't understand with a lot of clarity the mission and the values, the operating principles, and they're remote too, and so heavy investments in onboarding and internal comms have happened as a result of seeing some of these things start to break. I think the thing that we've done well is really just like ensuring that everyone can receive feedback and building openness in the company, and something that we continue to drive. And actually just simple mechanisms help with that. So all of our one-on-ones kind of end with feedback and things that I liked what you did this week and things that I wish you did better. And if you could just build the muscle for that and do it weekly, and the entire organization is open to feedback, which I think we've done really well.
Yeah, I think you folks have managed that transition really well. I know that I joined Google at 1,500 and left at 15,000, and Twitter at 90 and left at 1,500. And the first time around, hypergrowth was just this chaotic mess, and everything seemed broken and terrible. And this is at Google, which is now pointed to as one of the best-run companies. And so the second time at Twitter, I was like, okay, this is normal. Like everything's going to break, and as long as you maintain raw product market fit, you have time to fix it. So that experience definitely resonates. One of the folks I think one of the things you've all have done well is really focus on how to scale your employee base, how to mentor them. So what do you view as signs of somebody's really going to sort of scale and take it to the next level as a company grows?
Yeah, it's an important question, because I think when you're growing through this chapter, there's a lot of people who joined early on that put their heart and soul into the organization and took a risk, and it required courage to do something like that. And as a company kind of 3X's in staff, they're required to manage more people or even manage managers, and it's just it's a pretty challenging transition. But I think the thing that I find as the number one indicator of someone who can actually keep up is kind of a growth mindset, and along the same lines of receiving feedback really well. And I think if you have a growth mindset, it really widens your aperture for development. And the people that have done really well at Opendoor are the ones that are continuously seeking advice, learning. And I also think it's like never too early to get a coach. And so one of the things we've done well is ensuring that the people we do want to invest in get real mentorship on a weekly basis so they can keep up.
Where does that mentorship come from? Is it internal? Is it external? Is it a mix?
Yeah, I mean, we've done it through external folks. And so anyone that we want to really develop into kind of a world-class executive, we find someone to pair with them, and it's typically external. And there's great mentors in the Valley, which has really benefited our team.
What are some of the tips that you think you'd tell a younger version of yourself, or tips that have really you think are helpful to founder CEOs?
Yeah, lots. If you can invent a time machine, I'd love to use that and avoid all the mistakes I made. But the first is really around this notion of debt. I think you kind of incur debt across every function, whether it's technical debt or user experience debt or management debt, comms debt. And so I think it's important to acknowledge that like you're accumulating debt as the company scales and grows, as you're building things. And early on, we were hyper focused on product market fit. And actually, that still is like mostly the only thing that matters in organizations, is ensuring that the product is perfectly matching the customer needs. But you accumulate debt as you grow, and so I would have acknowledged that there's debt and kept an eye on what are the things that are starting to really break and pay down that debt. The second thing I tell myself before starting this company is really just like continue to treat the organization as a portfolio, and it's both a portfolio of talent as well as a portfolio of initiatives. And so, I mean, this is a classic example debate around like innovation versus optimization. At Opendoor, we call it running plays versus passing plays, and the best organizations have to have both really good running plays, getting 3 yards at a time, or optimizing 1% every day, as well as kind of big bets and bold bets. And so just ensuring that we continue to have that mix. I think last year at Opendoor, we spent a great deal of energy and effort optimizing and just keeping everything together as we scaled. And I think we now need to shift into a mode where we can reinvent the buyer experience. How do we do that really well and do it in a very unique way? And the third thing I would tell myself is to only hire missionaries. I think that's really important. And you see this, you see like a lot of people join in the Series A, and they want to join because they want to be part of a startup, and they want to experience that, the growth, but not really there for the mission or to solve the hard consumer problems. And really, greatness comes late at night when no one's looking, and you're like willing to do the hard work and service of the mission of the customer. And so, in the Valley, there's a lot of this like join at Series A, leave at Series D. I think it's really important to, especially in the early stage, try to hire as many missionaries as possible who really care deeply about the problem. Then I'd say sleep more would be the last one.
Yeah, a lot of people don't sleep and exercise enough. So, how can you identify people who are very mission-driven? Like, are there specific signs in the interview process? Are there specific questions that you ask them?
Yeah, and actually, we know we're hiring aggressively still, and so one of the things is how much time do you spend talking about, title, level, reporting structure, org structure, versus impact and the core problems and things to be built to really, build greatness. And so, it's really just like, what is the mindset of the individual? And then, the classic stuff like trying to figure out what motivates them. So if they're joining because they're so excited to solve the hard problems in the space, then they're going to be there for the long haul. Whereas there's a lot of people who care deeply about kind of title, comp, and their career.
Yeah, when I look at your executive layer of the team under you, you've hired some really amazing people, and very experienced. So your CFO, I believe, came out of Amazon. Your COO out of Uber. What are some of the companies that you view as sort of inspiration or ones that Opendoor can role model itself against?
Yeah, my CFO was at Amazon for 12 years, and we joke that every meeting he has to tell a story about Amazon. And so it is truly an exceptional company, though, and I think it's one of our role models. And they've showed patience. They've done the hard things, and it's a classic study of like eBay versus Amazon, and if you're vertically integrated and really do the hard work, build logistics and operations, can that be a core competitive moat? And I think they've demonstrated that. Uber's a different type of company in that they were very aggressive, and they kind of said, we're going to go very broad very quickly, and aggression paid off for them. And so I think like Amazon is aggressive but very patient, and I think Uber also has elements of that aggression. So the combination of the two has been good for the Opendoor.
I know that at Amazon, they were known for things like, you write up a 2 or 3 page document, I think, before meetings, and then people silently read it, and then they have a discussion. Have you adopted any of those practices as part of sort of onboarding your CFO?
Yeah, we tried the memo culture, which is a 6-page memo. It takes a lot of time to write these memos, and it requires people to be really good at writing as opposed to presenting. And so the organization had to shift. We weren't able to get fully there. I think we still do memos before meetings, but we do pre-reads, which helps quite a bit. And that is taken from Amazon, which is instead of having a presentation, just spend the first 10 minutes to read the presentation and then discuss the things that you need to discuss. And so a lot of times meetings are around PowerPoint and presenting the content, but we just take 10 minutes in the beginning. We're going to look at the metrics and the content, and then have the discussion as opposed to spending all the time kind of in presentation mode.
Also related to Amazon, are there any pictures you should tell us about that we should know about, or everything is, sorry, it's a bad Bezos joke, so I'll move on. Yeah, too soon. What do you think are other lessons or other companies that, because I think if you look at Amazon, I think too many people over-extrapolate Amazon's business model there. So many startups say that the only thing you should focus on is market share, and you shouldn't care about margin, and you shouldn't care about pricing. And so you see a lot of people who are going for share versus a high margin business. And if you look at many of the most successful companies, Google, Facebook, et cetera, those tend to be very high margin businesses that have enormous operating leverage. How do you think about the trade-off between scale and margin and how that applies to Opendoor?
Yeah, that's a good question. Actually, we have this debate all the time internally, which is how much energy and effort do we put towards our unit economics versus kind of expansion and growth, and we think about it as constraints, right? So what are you trying to accomplish? And our vision long term is to build a product that everyone uses when they're buying and selling real estate, and that's really, it could take 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, but we want to win the market. So market share does matter a lot, but the constraint is doing it with healthy economics, right? Because it's really easy to win market share by lowering fees or lowering your cost. In any category, it could be e-commerce or travel or whatever. You can win market share by doing it unsustainably. And so we think about it as the goal is to win the market, but the constraint is durable economics. And so in our business in particular, there's high elasticity based on fee. And so really, a lot of our resources go towards lowering the cost of the transaction itself. And if we could do that, again, we think about it as how do we make it frictionless, and then eventually either low cost or free, and that's what we're working towards. So the answer is we have to have a constraint there.
And then I know we're running out of time, so last question before we wrap. If you look ahead 5 years and you extrapolate back and say, this is what success means if we make it, what's your sort of 5-year view of what Opendoor should be or should accomplish?
5 years from now?
Yeah, correct.
Ooh.
Because you're about 5 years in now, right?
Yeah.
So it'll be at the 10-year anniversary of the company.
Well, I really do believe in this notion that in almost any category, things should be self-service on demand. Right, so success for me would be we've built a platform that customers can go to, or a marketplace that consumers can go to and buy, sell a home that is self-service on demand. So removing all the friction from the transaction. One of the things I care deeply about is this the notion of like mobility between cities. I think in the way that Uber and Lyft made it really easy for us to kind of go between neighborhoods in real time, I think Opendoor should strive to make it really, really simple, elegant, and frictionless to move between cities. And so if we can deliver on the product experience of being frictionless, the hope is that people move more often.
Okay, great. Well, thanks so much for the time, and thanks everybody for sticking with us through the darkness and everything else.